Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast,
the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education.
The goal is to provide meaningful conversations to what is currently happening in our classrooms.
Stories, pains,
moments of success.
We want to hear it all. Hello, and welcome today to Under the Hat podcast. As usual, I am Sophie, your glorious and wonderful sparkle-bringing host. Steve is running a 5K today, so I said, go do you, boo, and I got this podcast. And today, we're joined by Casey T. I hope I say this right. I should have asked you beforehand. Jakubowskig? Yeah, cool. An author, consultant, and former educator who's passionate about empowering teachers and creating positive learning environments. He's written books like Crush It from the Start, 50 Tips for New Teachers, and Thinking About Teaching. I read the description about that one, and I was like, ooh. Offering practical advice and insights for educators, but beyond classroom management, Casey is deeply interested in fostering supportive school cultures, and today, we'll delve into the aspect of that, which is bullying, because today's topic is an honest chat about preventing bullying in education. Welcome, Dr. Casey, to the show.
Thanks, Sophie. Can't wait to talk with you. Too bad Steve's running a 5K. The only thing I run 5K for is an extra set of chocolate.
Right? Oh my gosh. So at my job, we have people traveling to Orlando starting Monday for my job, and they're coming from New Zealand, and the New Zealand chocolate, Whitaker's, I would definitely run a 5K for that Whitaker's chocolate that they're bringing us, and I'm very appreciative of that.
Shout out to my hometown, Buffalo, New York, where not only do they make amazing something called sponge cake, but there is amazing chocolates at the Broadway Market. Have you ever heard of sponge candy or sponge cake candy?
Actually, one of my coworkers is near Buffalo, and she brought like sponge candy to an event, and yes, it was really good.
Yeah. Shout out to Buffalo, where you will have a heart attack, but you're going to enjoy life on the way.
Oh, sorry, that was funny.
Thank you.
Allow you to enjoy life on the way. Okay, so Dr. Casey, I just sort of introduced like who you are now, but tell me a little bit about your education journey.
Sure. Well, it began back in the 90s, so I guess I'm a Gen Xer, as they say. And when I was young, I really wanted to go into something where I could make a difference in the world. So I wanted to be a teacher. I am a first-generation teacher. I'm not a first-generation college grad. My mom and dad both graduated from college. But I was the first one that said, I'm going to try this teaching thing. And I was drawn to social studies because I love stories and I love people. And I love talking about why the past is so relevant in today. And so I went to a great state school called SUNY Fredonia, Go Blue Devils, to get my bachelor's degree in teaching. And when I was there, it was in the 90s when there was a lot of teachers and not a lot of jobs. So I interviewed everywhere. And I finally, the day before the school year began in the late 90s, I was hired by a small district in rural upstate New York. Now, for many of you, when you think of New York, you think about, it's big cities, tall towers. No, the part of New York I lived in, the tallest thing around there was the mountains. The only place where there was an elevator was in the school. It was an old works progress 1920s school. And I was asked to teach 4 different grade levels. While I was there, I realized that there was a lot going on in education, and I decided that it would probably be a good idea to look elsewhere. And I'll get into it a little bit after I do my introduction, because it inspired me to write a book called A Cog in the Machine about my career and also about what happened to me in my career. And so I moved on. I moved to Central New York, and I taught there for a little bit. And I was going back to school, getting a master's degree in history. And what I realized was that I loved history, but I loved teaching it more than I loved really researching it. And so I got a master's degree in history, but then I went to work at a college as a college professor, as an adjunct, did that for a little bit. Then I went to work for the state education department, working with schools that were what's called an accountability status. That's the ESSA and No Child Left Behind and all that stuff that really changed our careers. And after a while, I thought, you know what, I really ought to earn a doctorate. And so I did. And I wrote about rural education policy. But along the way, I earned a certificate of advanced studies in teacher mentoring, because I realized that I was running into a lot of situations as a teacher where there was a lot of things going on where it was basically throw you into the pool, and if you sank, oh well. If you swam, that's great. And I thought, you know, I don't want to do this. I don't want other people to feel like they are professionally drowning. And so I worked with Dr. Matt Rhodes, Dr. Sam F., and with Dr. Kevin Lightman to write 50 Tips for New Teachers, because all four of us realized we all left the teaching profession and we're now affiliated with it through either college work that we do or through professional development, or in my instance, coaching and consulting. But we all left. And we thought, my God, if four of us left, and we're fairly smart people, what's going on here? And so my journey has been one where I am an eternal optimist, but I realize that there is a realism, and I'm trying to tell the story so that others can go, yeah, I experienced that too. I'm not alone. Oh, wow. Because Sophie, that's something that we talk about with our kids. You know, it's okay. You're not alone. I absolutely love the song by Jelly Roll, where he goes, I'm not okay, but I know I'm going to be all right. And
Yes.
that has become my anthem. I'm not okay at the moment, but I know I'm going to be all right. And I think that that's something that we got to talk about, because there are so many educators right now who, if they put that song on, they're going to cry, because that's the feels that they're getting, or that's the vibe. Can we talk about vibing, or is that too millennial?
We totally can talk about vibing.
Awesome.
For sure. I live in West Virginia, so you're talking about rural education. That is all of West Virginia. So I feel that. I feel that in my bones. And like the more rural, the more sort of like there's 3 people in the school that literally do everything for the school. They're running the after school program, they're running the bus duty, they're running all of the committees, they're doing everything. And then there's these couple of other people that just show up, do their contracted hours, and leave. And they try to bring in everybody else because you need everybody else, because you don't have this school of 1 million kids and like with a bunch of different teachers that can take on all the different committees. You've got like 15 adults maybe that we've got to come together, work together, and do all of this for the kids. But then when do you say, I've had enough, I can't do this anymore? Like I can't, like I my first job, I was very rural West Virginia, and I would go in early to try to get things done and stay late because I had an hour trip to get there. And so sometimes I wasn't getting home until 9 o'clock at night. Thank goodness I didn't have kids, because I wouldn't have been able to do it. I wouldn't have been able to survive. I was at that school building 12 hours, 14 hours a day, just trying to survive. And I didn't know what I was doing classroom management wise. It was the first year. So that's always a weird year. I was in an area where I wasn't from. So I didn't know anybody, and I was sort of alone. And it was middle school. Middle school is a whole jungle of its own thing. So it was just really trying to navigate everything and being on your own. I wish I had your book of 50 tips for a first year teacher, because that probably would have changed my entire life.
That's so kind of you, and thank you. And again, it's all of our book. The four of us who wrote it really thought we needed to do something, and I brought the rural lens to it. I wrote a book called A Cog in the Machine, which is about teaching in a rural area, and Thinking About Teaching, which is also about teaching in a rural area. And in those two books, you're right. You become, especially when you graduate from school, you're like, oh my gosh, I have my bachelor's degree or my master's degree. I'm ready to go. I can't wait to do it. And you get in there and you just think to yourself, what is going wrong? I was getting A's in class. I was like, awesome. I knew what I was doing when I was student teaching. I was doing great. And then they throw you into the deep end. I had 4 preps. I had 7th grade, 9th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. And for those of you who are secondary teachers, that's a lot. For those of you that are elementary teachers, you're like, we have everything. Did you get a chance to go to the bathroom? Because I didn't. And I know that elementary teachers are like heroes because they have, kids in their class for the entire day, but they're trying to do everything.
Mhm.
And one of the areas that I noticed was, Sophie, you're absolutely right. There were some teachers who showed up and did everything. There were also some teachers who were like, yeah, I graduated from here. My grandparents graduated from here. Oh, by the way, my family founded the town 200 years ago. And you think about that and okay, that's awesome. But when somebody looks at you and they say, hey, your last name's different. You're not from around these parts, are you? And you go, no. And they're like, oh, well, that's an ethnic last name. You're like, hey, thanks for the microaggression. Or, if you move in and they're immediately going, can I introduce you to so and so? They're not married. And you're like, whoa, time out, hold it. Could we like personal, professional? And that was one thing that I really noticed when I was in my rural communities, plural, because I've been in a few, is your life is not your life. You are expected to not only have your day teacher job, but you're also expected to be a part of the community. And as we all know, you need to sometimes walk away because you need that mental break. I used to literally go drive up to Buffalo to see my family in the suburbs and to see my then girlfriend at the time because it was like, I need to get out of here. Because when the person knows that you're going to show up to the blimpy sub that's in the gas station at 11:45 every day and they hand you your sub because they know your order, you might be in a small community.
Uh-huh.
And that's okay. But oh my God, what if I want turkey, not roast beef? Come on. Yeah, right?
Oh my gosh. You're literally yes, that's where I grew up. Like that is where I grew up. Like they knew when I was gonna come, they knew my order when I was gonna be there. The blimpie, literally in the gas station. It's exactly what we're talking about here. Where I grew up and then where I went to teach. That was a pizza place at a gas station.
And sometimes
But
that's the only place, right? The pizza place in the gas station, or you pray the cafeteria has food that's edible. And if it doesn't, then you go, oh my gosh, the kids aren't getting good food. But then as the adult, you're like, what do I do? Because like you said, I mean, I needed the internet to do some of my lesson plans because, back in 1999 and 2000, that was the thing, trying to use internet and technology. And I didn't have the internet in my house. I had to be at the school to utilize that. So I wasn't staying till 9 o'clock at night. I probably should have, but I was staying until 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. And in a lot of these communities, the restaurants are, if they have one, are closed.
mm-hmm. Everything shuts down at like 6. Nothing's open. Everyone's at home. Yeah. However, I will say that every time I stopped alongside the road for whatever reason, and with one particular time I hit a pothole, dented my rim, needed to change my tire. Fully capable, I can do it. I've done it. 3 people stopped, make sure I'm okay.
Oh,
within minutes. So you will not find nicer people than you will in a
Correct.
rural community. They're going to be there for you. They're going to support you whether they know you or not. But there's also skepticism because you're an outsider.
Exactly. And I loved it because sometimes what would happen was there would be little fruit or vegetable baskets on my doorstep when I would get home, and or like there'd be a meal, like the other teachers or the teacher aides or sometimes just the local families, they'd be like, "Oh, you're a single guy, you're not cooking for yourself. Here's a nice stew." And it's like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are so sweet." Ah! But yeah, the skepticism really comes in, especially because a lot of times they really want to know what they're getting, and quite frankly, because of the turnover in rural schools, everybody talks about urban turnover, but rural turnover is worse. You either have teachers that are from the community that come in and stay, or you have teachers like me who are outside the community who something triggers us to leave. But the kids are, quite frankly, upsettingly used to losing teachers and administrators, and they're used to having people leave, and they get really concerned because they want to know, did we do something? And then when you're like, no, I need to do this because of whatever, they're like, oh, thank gosh. Because honestly, I love the students because they take so much personally. They'll be like, oh no, we drove another teacher out. And it's like, no, you didn't do that. Somebody else did it. So I love how the kids are just like, yeah, we kind of wanted you to stay. You were pretty awesome. It's like, no, I'm young and I let you get away with everything.
Yeah. I'm young and funny and I get your jokes, and that's why you want me to stay. Yeah, but yeah, you're right, because I went to a school that taught my dad. That went to school with an uncle or something like that. So like it was just like, if you know they're from the area, you know that they're going to stay there. I don't like it was just they were going to stay there. But if someone came from outside the community and came and was in there, then you knew that they were probably going to leave after a couple of years. So that was something that, yeah, you just knew. But there was also like, because I wasn't from there, I couldn't get away with the things that I was seeing in other classrooms, because the teacher right next door could theoretically, not saying this happened, could theoretically whip a child, and the parents be like, good, I'm glad. I did the same thing for the same exact reason. I'm getting skinned alive. Like, it's because I'm not from there. Because that teacher taught that kid and that kid's parents and that parent's parent, and like they are just a godsend. But I couldn't get away with anything. One mistake and they're calling the principal.
I had that happen to me too, and it was situation where, yeah, I made a rookie mistake, but the way the principal came down on me because I had a teacher's kid was really, I mean, there is a way to tell a novice teacher you screwed up, and then there is what happened. And when you go home at the end of the day and you call your parents and you're like, I think I'm going to get fired because I did X, Y, and Z. And they're like, that should not have been like us. And, and at a certain point in time, what you think is, especially when they're like, oh, you're having trouble with classroom management, we're going to send you to training on classroom management. Can we just get over the fact that classroom management isn't something that you learn until you are at least 25 and have the ability to use a teacher voice? Or, I've learned to drop my glasses down my nose, look at somebody and go, unacceptable. And teaching that to younger people who are trying so hard is really bad. And then what I didn't like was how the other teachers would gossip about how bad things were in your classroom. And the kids would feed into it. And you're like, come on, could you have a little bit of professionalism? could you maybe like come talk to me and say, hey, just to let you know, your third period class thought you were an idiot because you said X, Y, and Z, or, you know, your eighth period class is taking advantage of you because you're really young and, you know, you don't know. I mean, it's not like you've developed a gut yet, because as that comedian Taylor Tomlinson says, all you have is not bad choices yet, right? And a lot of this classroom management is stuff that A, the prep programs are not teaching. B, there's no really good resource out there, because I'll tell you, I mean, you try a token economy in your classroom, or you try the PBIS stuff that's happening. And as a former district director of PBIS, the kids are like, whatever. You know, they don't care if you're getting little candy bars. They don't care if you're getting little toys. What they're trying to do is they're trying to game the system. They want as many tickets or tokens or whatever as possible. And some of them, they are negotiators. Like I am afraid to buy a car in a few years once those kids graduate and get jobs as car salesmen, because like I'm going to pay through the nose.
Yeah.
And you know, and you realize though that people don't often talk to you as a professional when you're a young teacher, because all they see you is just a super senior, or they see you as a recent college grad, and they, you know, and you're trying really hard to be a colleague, but you haven't learned how to be a colleague, because that again is not taught in teacher prep programs. And I don't know about you all, but I have been on enough like higher ed faculty meetings and stuff to realize that there ain't no positivity in most higher ed situations. It is dog eat dog world. And you're like, shouldn't you be modeling good behavior for us? And they're like, no, I object to the fact that they cited this person and they didn't cite this person. And you're like, really, you're going to have like this war because of the citations? And to me, it's crazy, because you also see this bad behavior in faculty and schools. And I know there's a lot of people trying to do really hard work. I am not taking it aside from them, but the amount of sniping, stop, people, really stop. You're all in the same wing. You're all sharing classrooms. You're all sharing kids. And especially in smaller districts, you're sharing generations worth of kids or families worth of kids. And, you know, really, why beat up on somebody because you think they're disorganized? Go help them if you think they're disorganized. They may not know how to do it, or they may have there's a term for it. Executive functioning may not be their thing, right? And we give such grace and space to our children in school, but boy, oh boy, the minute they become a teacher and a colleague, it's like, you got to be perfect. And it's like, whoa, wait, time out. Whoa.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I feel this in my soul. I am one of the most accommodating people that you will ever come across. I'm the one that immediately is going to be the first thing that's like, okay, so this happened, but did they know how to do it this way? So you didn't do it the way you were supposed to do it, but did you know?
Mm-hmm.
And if you did know, did you know how?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the first one to ask that question, and I'm the first one to be like, okay, and I'm going to ask a million questions, and not because I'm scrutinizing what's happening or what you said, but because I want to fully understand before I try to help or give constructive criticism. And I will, like, I'm cool with like, okay, this was going on at home. You're going to get a little bit of extra more time, but seriously, dude, like, I'm doing this because you came and talked to me about it, not because I do this for everybody type of thing.
You're right.
And that is true. We accommodate our kids. We scaffold instruction. I even remember teaching students in middle school how to walk on the right side of the hallway at the beginning of the school year. I remember going through the school handbook, and the math department had this section of the school handbook to go over when their kids came to them. So each department had a different section to review in the school handbook. And I explained what that actually meant to the students, just not assuming that we're just going to read this and move on. I actually explained what that meant. But when I was a first year teacher, even 1 to 3 years of teaching, I wasn't explained anything. I was handed something one time and they said, sign this. And I signed it, and I could put this in a locked cabinet and put this on the outside of it. And if someone asks to see this, have them sign this. And I'm like, okay, I couldn't even tell you what this was. I didn't know.
Yeah. That's onboarding, and that's a real problem with onboarding, isn't it, Sophie?
So huge problem with onboarding. I learned pretty much nothing my first year from anybody else, because except what it felt like to be an outsider my first year. Because then later that year, I found out that those were the IEPs and the accommodations that I was supposed to be giving to my students. I realized that one student was failing because I was supposed to be reading aloud to him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. And that teacher that came to me and was like, sign this, take this, da da da, came into my classroom during class and yelled at me in front of my students. And I was like, what? What?
It's sad. It's sad when people don't realize how their routine and their experience takes away from the education process. And I hear you on the IEPs. As a secondary person and somebody who is the director of special ed in a district, I wrote a little bit about this in a couple of my books, and we talked about it in 50 Tips. IEPs are legal documents, and when you are 22 years old, you're like, I got a ticket for speeding when I was 19, and normally your parents helped you take care of it. But if you don't do something right, you could cost the district a couple of $1 million. And, there's a lot of, there's also a lot of adults out there who are quote unquote professionals who seem to think that they don't need to explain because you're a professional too. Yet all the research says that it takes 5 years for you to be comfortable in your own classroom. It takes you 10 years to really understand what you're doing. And oh, by the way, we've lost 50% of our new teachers in the first 5 years. And I think, based upon some back of the napkin math I've been doing, after COVID, I think it's creeping closer to 60 to 65% of teachers in their first 5 years. The other area that we really got to talk about is the fact that people feel empowered to attack others. That's really an example of management not doing their job. I refuse to use the term leadership, because if you are in charge of something and you allow a toxic workplace to happen, you're not a leader. You're a manager or you're an administrator. And I believe in my heart of hearts that even though people who become principals, department chairs, etc., go through these trainings where they learn about this stuff, they don't enact it. And partially it's because the system is demanding more from them with less resources. So I get that. But I also feel like you've got to, as a person who is in a management role or an administrator role, you have to become a model. You have to become an example. And people are always going to complain about the administration, or they're always going to complain about district office. But if you're in a rural district, sometimes district office is the next door down from the principal, or they may even share an office suite. And you need to say to somebody, hey, look, I'm trying my best here, but I don't know what I'm doing. I haven't been onboarded correctly. People forget that we are learners, and what happens after people feel upset or they feel like they don't belong, they want to leave. And that is, I really think, a huge issue that we are seeing in schools where they're not feeling welcomed, they're not feeling like they belong. There's toxicity in these communities and in these schools. And even if they believe that they're like NPR, Lake Woebegone, everything's perfect, everybody's got to take a minute and look at themselves. And they've got to say, are we actually an opening, welcoming community? Are we willing to say when somebody's got, when they're a diabetic, if they're a kid, they get the world, right? But if they're a diabetic as a teacher, it's like, yeah, no, tough crap. I'm assigning you to the lunch when it's more convenient for the school. Or, hey, we're scheduling a meeting when you really need a snack. And oh, by the way, it's, quote, unprofessional for you to eat a snack or drink. And at the end of the day, also, if you don't clue new people into the dynamics of a community, or you don't clue people in as to what the expectations are, then you're essentially setting them up for failure. And is it failure because you don't realize that you're allowing this bad behavior to happen? Or is it just, oh, well, I don't have time to do it, I want to stay in my office? Or, quite frankly, we hired you, but if you stay, meh. If you go, meh.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. I sort of agree with you. I want to go back to one of the first things that you said this last time was leaders lead, managers are managing. And I think in our last podcast, our guest we were talking about how in the system we have now, it's natural to just hire managers in that position so they get things done. And not all of them are leading change, are leading innovation. We've had a principal in from California that is leading this amazing positive change and things in their middle school and leading by example.
Mhm.
And that is one of the most the strongest, you've got to. And I think one of the biggest things anybody needs to think about before they go and start gossiping, sniping, questioning is, did they know? Because if they didn't know, and they didn't know that they didn't know, there were times where I was like, I didn't know that I needed to ask that question because I didn't know that was required of me. I don't know what I don't know. And then I get in trouble for not knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, my first year, the only time I saw my principal was when I was in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, the only time I saw the other faculty was when we were in mandatory faculty meetings or when they were coming to my classroom to yell at me.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that I thought were mentoring me and becoming my friends were the ones going and telling other people that I was saying things and I had calls for me to be yelled at. But then later I got an apology, but I felt like it was supposed to be fair that she apologized to me in front of my students since she yelled at me in front of my students, because that degraded me in front of them and caused more issues in my classroom management because they saw another teacher yelling at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how do you expect me to get better when no one is giving me other strategies to become better? One of the things with classroom, every first year teacher has issues with classroom management. Like you said, there's whole brain science. You're not fully developed till 25. You've got to figure out the relationships. And now classroom management is more based on relationships rather than it is your kids living in fear and stuff. And so they were like, the only thing that they were giving me for advice was, you need to pull that student aside and talk to them when they're being a distraction. And I'm like, but principal, all of them are talking it over me. It's not just one student causing an
Right.
issue. It's all of them having their
Right.
own side conversations. Am I supposed to just spend the whole class period instead of teaching, having one-on-one conversations in the hallway?
Yeah, and they'll say something stupid to you like, "Oh, build a relationship or have clear expectations." It's like, check, check, next. And, for me, one of the biggest questions I have is, do people know that kids have really changed? I mean, have they really changed, or are they? I will tell you this. There is a joke that goes on in history education where we talk about how Socrates complained about the students in ancient Greece. And, it's like, okay, so we get it. Kids are kids, whatever. But here's the problem that we have. First of all, there are so many underlying assumptions about making that transition into professionalism as people are becoming adults. The other thing that happens is that there isn't good mental health support for teachers. Not only is the trauma that's happening to teachers happening because they're taking on what their students are going through, but their own lives are a mess. I mean, I remember my first year of teaching, it was hard. I was living from home. I wasn't surrounded by anybody that was my age. I also remember when I moved with my then fiance, who then became my wife, who is now my ex-wife. We moved halfway across the state for her teaching job. And my gosh, to be that far away from my family, to then have a death in the family, to then wake up one day to realize, oh, well, we've decided we don't want to keep you as a professional. And you're like, well, what could I have done differently? And you look at all the feedback that they gave you, and it was absolutely fine until the divorce became final. And then because I got divorced, I started to have issues I didn't realize I was having. But, I got called into the principal's office and was told, why are these kids coming to me and say, don't get rid of Mr. J, we love him? Did you put them up to it? As opposed to, well, the students really like it. Maybe there's a little bit of an issue here, but gee, his wife just left him and took the dog. There's issues, right? I mean, we had a teacher this past year who her mother got really sick and she didn't tell anybody because it's nobody's business, right? That's why there's privacy laws in the United States. And she had to fly out to Chicago like twice a month to be with her mom as an only child. And everybody's like, well, she's always walking in late. She's 15 minutes late every Monday morning, and she leaves 15 minutes early every Friday. Well, where we were, the nearest airport was a 2.5-hour drive. So of course she's going to be leaving a little early and a little late, because she was taking a red eye from Chicago to Albany and then driving from 5 a.m. to make it for an 8 o'clock start time. So finally I stopped her one day because they're like, well, you got to tell her that people are starting to notice. And I'm like, I'm not her supervisor. I'm the director of special ed. Why am I telling her? Because the principal didn't want to, the superintendent didn't want to, the business manager didn't want to. So it was up to me as the rookie administrator. And I said, I got to tell you, you're a phenomenal teacher, but I'm worried about you. What's going on? And she's like, my mom has cancer. They've given her 6 months to live. And I said, oh my God, what can we do to help you? And she said, you're the first person to ask me that. And I said, it's okay. This is a burden that you don't need to share on yourself. Just like when my mother passed away 2 years ago, my boss at the time said, you have a typo in your away message. I don't think you're grading at a rigorous enough level. And oh, by the way, some of the students are complaining you're not getting back to them. That was one person who I said to them in a text message on my personal phone, because they had emailed me at work and called me at work, and they wanted an answer that day. And I said, my mother is gravely ill. I am unavailable at the moment. Please talk to the other person. And that was it. And so what I realized after this happened to me, after my mother passed away, and this boss gaslit me and created a toxic environment, I didn't need to be there anymore. And I left a tenured track position in higher ed. And those are like gold. And people are like, why did you do that? And I said, because I value me way too much to put up with this. I would rather do something else than subject myself to this. And this is the problem, Sophie, that I have in education, is that there are good places and there are good people, but for some reason, systematically, our teachers are burnt out, our principals are burnt out, our district folks are burnt out, our aides, our assistants, everybody is burnt out. So what's happening in the system that good people are going to their absolute worst based devils? Or if they're staying good, folks are like, oh my gosh, you're the best thing that's ever happened. Why can't more people be like you? And it's like, I'm just trying to be human. What in education is creating this destruction? What is creating this personal race to the bottom? You know, what's causing people to snap at kids and adults and others? And I really think it's because the system's asking us to do too much. And I think that the fact that we are not getting the support we need is astronomical. Because I don't know about you, but when COVID first hit, people are like, oh my God, teachers are amazing. I can't do this. How do you do this? How do you do this? And then 4 months later, after some wealthy business person said, get your butts back to work, he's like, you lazy butt teachers, or you teachers, blah, blah, blah. And everybody was like, you know, attacking and ganging up. And now people are saying we're trying to brainwash kids. If I could brainwash a kid, I'd make them wear deodorant and hand in their stuff on time. That's all I want. You know, or for them to not use like Skibbity or text or write an essay that you know has text speak in it. We're this constant looking at teachers as evil is I hate to say it, it's a systematic bullying of especially female identifying individuals, because teaching is still a very heavily female dominated profession, you know.
But it didn't used to be.
Correct.
It used to be very male dominated, and it was more respected then.
Correct. And it was until approximately the Civil War. But you know, but the other thing is, yeah, but you know, a lot of people don't realize this, but a lot of folks, like you talked about, Sophie, they were men, they were going on to read law, they were going on to start a business, they were going to do something else, and teaching was a way station to earn a little bit of money. You know, and then people don't realize this when teaching became professionalized, and you know, unions were formed in teaching so that women weren't fired for becoming engaged, getting married, having a baby, but they were also formed to equalize pay, because female teachers were often paid tens of thousands of dollars, equivalent in today's salary, less than their male counterparts. Mm-hmm. And if we want good things, we've got to say to people who are teaching, you are a crucial aspect. I love the fact that something happened during COVID. People are like, oh, first responders, nurses are amazing. Well, and then afterwards, they're like, oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. So a whole bunch of nurses in Buffalo went on strike. And the hospital administrators were freaking out and going, you're going to create problems with patients. You're going to create, you know, safety issues. And the nurses went, no, you consistently understaffing us is creating these problems.
Creating issues.
How many times, Sophie, have we seen in education where a teacher will do something, quote, for the kids?
All the time.
I cannot tell you how much that the system works on the unpaid labor of especially young, precarious teachers who will say yes to everything because they're afraid of losing their jobs. And yet, senior veteran teachers will not step up and go to the principal and go, hey, you know what? That wasn't cool. That was not cool. And quite frankly, that was lazy. Ask a person who's not being overwhelmed, trying to do their day job to do everything else. Oh, we were just trying to get them a little bit more money, because it creates a stipend or whatever. Yeah, it's a $500 stipend for 8,000 hours of work. It's ridiculous.
And they go to the new people because they haven't learned how to say no yet.
Correct. Or they're afraid of saying no, especially in states where they have like the 4-year tenure process.
Yeah.
Because one of the things is that a lot of people don't understand about this is a lot of districts have created a situation where it's a business. And even if you need things, the only way that you can legally get kids something is by it being in an IEP. Because they always find money for sports, they always find money for technology, they always find money for other things. But if you need to provide a teacher's aid to a classroom, they're going to go, well, where's the IEP backup? We want the state to reimburse us, or we want the federal government to reimburse us. And it's like, well, what do you mean? That makes good business sense, but it doesn't make good sense to help kids. And school districts now are some of them are sitting on piles of money. But in New York, we were told by our state comptroller that anything over 2% of our budget was excessive. And so now districts cannot have extra money. They want tax rates to be very low. They don't want this money being saved for things. But, the governor last year announced that she was going to cut hundreds of millions of dollars from small rural districts because of their population decrease. Well, if you lose one kid a grade level in a school, right, and you have 100 kids, yeah, it looks like you've lost 10%, but you can't cut anything because there's still children. So teachers are exhausted, they're overwhelmed, they're on edge. Everybody, they need to hire social workers for teachers. There's a lot of nepotism and cronyism, a lot of friends. And there's also a lot of places that if you're an outsider, they don't really like you. And unless you become part of the community where they really do like you, which is usually after your grandkids have buried you, oh, we love that person. They were here. They were great. Well, then why did you make their lives a living hell? Why didn't you step up? Why didn't you provide them stuff? Why didn't you say to a person, hey, I noticed yet your third period 8th graders are giving you a run for it. Do you want me to come in and help you for a little bit? It's my planning period. Because that is the area that we miss. We miss the collegiality. It's all built into student teaching. It's all built into the idealism of the theory of teaching. But most folks are like, nope, I'm not going to give up my planning period to help this person, or I want to get paid for it.
Or even they're overwhelmed. Like, I'm using my planning very structured, like very purposefully. I don't have the time to go and help that person doing that.
Right. And the parents who want teachers and they want school folks to be 24/7 to them, you had mentioned earlier that you had gotten things from schools in 5 different ways. I truly believe that parents are overwhelmed too, because they're being asked to do everything. They had children, and it's not like when my parents were there and I was younger, Sophie, my dad and my mom did not have 24/7 connections to work. If there was an emergency and they really needed to get hold of my dad, because he was actually a New York State Department of Health and Safety inspector. So like if a contractor decided to, I don't know, tear down a building without a permit at 9 o'clock at night, they would call him, but he wasn't expected to respond to emails immediately. He wasn't expected to have a cell phone on him. He wasn't texting people, and he could at 4:30 or 5 o'clock at night go, all right, I'm transitioning into dad. And he would commute home. We'd have dinner ready. We'd eat dinner, and then we'd go do the scouts. We'd go do band. But that was the thing, is that we only did like one thing each. My parents were very adamant that, yeah, you could potentially do all these things, but do one or two well. And I think, and there was this great article in the Atlantic last month that said how Ivy Leagues have screwed up in America. They talked about how parents are trying to make their kids so competitive for these Ivy League schools. They're taking away from them the joy of boredom. Don't do it all, do a few things well. And I loved my state school education. I was well educated.
Yeah. Well, and if you're from a rural community like me, the idea of going to anything other than a state uni is, I mean, I had great grades. I was active. I had all these extracurriculars that I was involved with. I probably could have, but it wasn't even an option to even try. It wasn't an option to attempt.
Correct.
Because I'm from the middle of nowhere.
Right.
You mentioned something earlier and then redirected back around to it. But you're like the rookies, basically. The rookies get the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
You're a new, particular high school teacher. You're a new high school teacher. You're going to get the freshman classes, all the freshman classes and all the extra like remedial classes.
Yep.
And because it's like, I've been here, I have seniority, I deserve to have the easier classes, the seniors, the ones that are taking this because they want to take it, the extra higher math classes. Like I get to be that person in teaching the honors classes because I have earned that. Not necessarily because they're the better teacher.
Right.
Because they've earned it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a rite of passage, sort of, to come
Hazing.
into.
Let's call it what it is. It's hazing, and it's an illegal thing.
For the newbie to have the worst case scenario handed to them. I've only been in one situation where I could have been handed the worst case scenario, and I was not given that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
because it was my first, I was a new teacher in that school building, fairly new to the community. No one really knew me. I was still learning my ways around this community. And I could have been given all of the co-teaching classes that had all of the IEPs and had all of the behavioral issues. I could have been given all of that because they had power over the the schedule. And there were 4 8th grade math teachers, but they didn't. And I really should go thank Dr. Rodler for not doing that. Because it set us up that the more experienced teachers, the teachers that have already been in this community for a while, the teachers that have already been teaching this topic for a while, to have that. And then it was going to be distributed more evenly the next year. But then, unfortunately, 2 of us got cut because we had a lowering population. They literally cut 3 math teachers and 3 English teachers in 1 year. And it changed the entire schedule. It changed the entire routine. It changed the entire everything for them the following year.
And I think you just raised a point, Sophie, about something that leader was super brave to ensure that the schedule was not terrible. But the point you just made about getting cut, that's another point that I think we got to really talk about for new novice folks. And quite frankly, nobody really understands this outside of educators, is that there are folks who they are on their 9th school system in 10 years, not because they've done anything wrong, but because the budgets have been fluctuating so bad. Or, they get a bump in enrollment and they need somebody for a little bit and then they don't need them anymore. And, I cannot tell you how disheartening that is, because I experienced it. I've had family members experience it. I've had people that I know who, you go through these processes where you're trained and then it's a crapshoot. You go out, you put yourself through rounds and rounds and rounds of interviews, and everybody wants something different. And then they come to you in like December and they're like, hey, just to let you know, the budget's not looking good for this upcoming year. You might want to prepare yourself. And then they come to you in March and they're like, hey, just to let you know, we're going to let you go. And you're like, what did I do wrong? And they're like, you didn't do anything wrong. This was a budgetary decision.
You didn't do anything wrong. You just happened to be new.
Well, exactly. And I mean, I know some people probably are going to say, well, you're beating up on seniority. No, what I think we're beating up on is the system is churning through new people. And I myself have even thought of this because I've been laid off 6 times since COVID. Okay. Every year I've been laid off. That is 6 job losses in 6 years. I have a PhD. I've written 7 books. But it's because the world budget doesn't value education anymore. You get to a certain point where it's 2 a.m. and you're literally looking to become a teller at a bank or to stock shelves at the local grocery store. Not saying that those aren't dignified work, because they are. And my God, those were essential people during COVID and they still are essential people. But you get to a point where you're like, how much longer can I take this? How much longer can I take the education system abuse that's been systematized? But also, how long can I have these interactions where you get the Sunday scaries or the Friday deflation where you're like, thank God I'm home. Like, I cannot kid you. I was married to an elementary school teacher and she would come home, eat dinner, and then lay down on the couch for an hour power nap before she would wake up and do grading until 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And that's no way to live. It's no way to live when, you have people who are being told by little hellions that they're going to hit you because you said to them, no, you cannot throw pencils at your classmate. Or like what I had to do last year when I was the director of special ed, I would have to go after all the pre-kindergartners who were eloping from the classroom. Now, I am a big man. I was a lineman for football when I played it, okay, either offensive or defensive line. I am not a wide receiver or running back speedster. And I don't know why the Lord gave those 4-year-olds power jets, but woo, could they take off and take those stairs? And if I chugged too hard, I was going to be out of breath, right? I actually had a kid I was chasing stop and go, you okay, Mr. Casey? And I'm like, it's your classroom buddy. And he's like, I'm not done running around yet. And I'm like, could we do it in the gym maybe? Not in the hallway? But that's the thing, is that they're cognizant enough of what they're doing. And it's like they look back and they smile at you. And then when you talk to the parents are like, I don't know what to do. And it's like, I can't keep chasing them. I'm going to have a workman's comp issue when I have a heart attack in the middle of third period.
We really don't know what to do, though. I'm one of those parents with the eloping child. Both of mine in pre-K tried to escape, and one did escape the fenced-in playground that they were in. They watched one, I think. One's a sweet boy, the other one's persistent. So the kindergarten crew was going out to the big playground, and the one just got in line with them to go with them. They're like, oh, kids are lining up, I'm just going to follow them. The other one climbed the fence because he saw the maintenance worker with tools, and he's like, "Oh, I help Daddy. I'm gonna go play with the tools with those guys." Just jumped right over the fence, ran right up to him. So yeah, I honestly don't know what to do with my kids when they do that, because they've eloped from my backyard. They've eloped from the house. I've chased them around my car a million times, just trying to get them in the car because it's not what they want to do right now. So legit, like, there just needs to be more education about parents, even about how to, like, and I'm an educator and I look up this stuff, and I did so much research on becoming a parent, but I did not do research on becoming a parent of special needs child, because that's not what I expected. All that came after the fact, which is a whole other thing.
So brave for telling us that, and I want to stop for a minute and honor that, because, you know, Sophie, I think that it's really important for us to take a minute and sit with your discomfort, because I think that one of the biggest areas we don't talk about is the bullying that a lot of people who are able do towards folks who are disabled. And as a type 2 diabetic with anxiety, you know, every time I would get a, "Hey, I need to talk to you," from the principal, I would be like, "Oh my God, what did I do wrong?"
Spiral down.
And I said to him, you know, I said, why don't you just tell me what you want to talk to me about so that I can be ready? And he's like, "Well, I just want to talk with you, whatever." And it's like, no, you don't understand. You're blowing up the next 3 periods of my life, okay? Because
it's the rejection, or it's RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, because I've got ADHD, and it was undiagnosed when I was first teaching. And I had the RSD. "I need to talk to you at the end of the day." And I'm like, "No, you need to talk to me now." Like,
yeah. But the other thing is this, you know, I noticed that people who are abled don't understand what disabled folks are going through, you know, and here's the fact of the matter. You never wanted your children to not come out perfect, and your children came out perfect, just the way they are. And here's what I'm going to say to you. Your children who are eloping on the playground, Sophie, or running to the maintenance man with the tool, they're making very logical, very awesome choices. Because what do we do in school? You know, you talk about it in our social justice world. I don't even know if I can talk about that anymore, or if half your listeners can listen to that concept of DEI anymore. But here's the thing. If we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, why are we forcing children who we know learn through play and through experiential learning? Why are we doing stuff to them that forces them out of their natural habitat? There is this huge movement to bring play back in. There's this huge movement to unstructure, to let children be children. It's about control. I think your 2 boys are making hugely rational decisions, because if I was your pre-kindergartner who climbed the fence to go to the bigger play, or got into the line to go play with the bigger kids on the bigger, absolutely, because that's awesome. Why are you limiting my experience? And for your little guy who wanted to go help with the tools, that's his jam. Sophie, you should be proud that they are exerting their personalities, because they don't have that filter that 99% of the world does. And that means your 2 little guys are going to do something awesome. They're not aligned, they're perfect. And I want all of you out there who are teachers right now, who are struggling about fitting in, to realize something. You are perfect. You are doing work that's going to create a saving grace moment for one of your children, one of your colleagues, one of your parents, something. And if you're not religious, I get it. If you don't believe in Kismet, I get it. But here's the thing I'm going to tell everybody out there. If you feel like you don't belong, you may not belong. Learn from it, move it on. But here's what I promise you. It does get better. I hated myself. I hated what was happening to me. I felt like I didn't belong. I'm going to be brave and admit I was depressed. I was suicidal. But here's what saved me. One of the kids saw me out shopping and dragged her mother from 3 aisles away and said, "Mom, I need you to meet Mr. J, my teacher. He's the only one that cares about us. Because you remember when Snuffy, our dog, died? He said, don't worry about the homework. Just take care of yourself, and I'll light a candle at church for Snuffy." I remember that 25 years later because the mom hugged me and said, "You don't even know how much that helped my little girl." You have to be there for somebody at some time. And sometimes it means being involved. And I'm not saying everybody's a firefighter or a first responder, but folks, firefighters run into the flames to save others. Sometimes we have to be in the flames in order to help somebody more in need. But you need to take care of yourself. You need to find somebody to talk to. You need to find something to do that's better. And again, if you are in a toxic work environment, you are a person and do not belong or do not deserve that. Speak up. And if they fire you, then collect unemployment on them and move on because they didn't deserve you.
They didn't deserve you. There's a place for you. You mentioned you don't belong, and there's a huge difference between fitting in and belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And you can fit in anywhere. That doesn't mean that you're going to be happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
Truly belonging somewhere, find that place. Find
Mm-hmm.
that place.
And it may take a while. It may take years. I'm still looking for the place that I belong because I've stopped trying to fit in. I am a Casey size piece, and unless you've got a Casey size hole in your organization, I'm not going because I've gotten to the point where me coming home at night and sitting down to pet my cats and listening to jazz music and having the energy and the intellectual capability to do other things is as important and crucial as going to work every day in a place that deserves me. And that's something that's very hard, especially if you're unemployed at the moment, to think, well, why don't they want me? Why don't they want me? There is a phrase I saw on the internet that I thought was so powerful. And it says, don't think about a door slamming. Think about it as moving a better pathway.
Moving on to a better pathway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love it. All right. So normally I would now ask you the one big question, which is what's under the hat for you? But I do believe that we have discussed that.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that we have discussed that. And I think that it's a good spot now for us to wrap up because you don't have to fit in. You don't have to force yourself into that box. Find the place where you belong.
Yeah. And I have some videos that I've been putting up called Jamming with Dr. J. I have a website called dragontamer.us. I'm on all the social media. Feel free to reach out to me, LinkedIn. I'm on X. I'm on Mastodon. I'm on all these other platforms. But one of the things that I want to share with you is it's okay to feel like you don't fit, as long as you feel like you belong or find a place you belong, because that's the only way.
It's okay to be a square cog in the machine if they are okay with you being square instead of round.
And sometimes they need a square, or they need a triangle, or they need an octagon, or they need a dodecahedron. They don't need a circle. They need you.
I need you.
They need you. And if they're bullying you, you're an adult now. It's okay to go, hey, that's not cool. And remember, if it continues to be a hostile work environment, use those resources when you go through that annual yearly training. Make that report, because you may be the first person that rips that Band-Aid off that can change a school or a community forever. And it hurts like heck for 30 seconds or a minute. But boy, oh boy, sometimes the bravest person is the person who stands up and say, this isn't okay. Because if they're bullying adults, they're sure as crap bullying kids.
Bullying the kids.
It may not be obvious, it may not be in words, but boy, oh boy, you could be the canary in the coal mine.
Mm-hmm.
Stand up. We got to make change. And the only way we're going to do that is if people stand up and say, enough's enough.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Casey. I loved our conversation. It has been fantastic. Thank you for saying that my boys are perfect.
They are. They're perfect.
And to our listeners, you're perfect too. And there's a perfect spot for you out there somewhere. And you deserve the best. So, I think last time I forgot to say this. Those listeners, keep your hats on and your minds open. And we'll see you next time on Under the Hat podcast, I believe next Saturday. And that Steve normally has the thing for next Saturday, but he'll post it on X and all the socials to let us know who we're talking to next Saturday. I'll be at FETC. If anyone's going to be at FETC, I'll be there. I'd love to see it and catch up. EduGuardians, shout out to EduGuardians. I'll be wearing a couple of hats while I'm there. Super exciting. And have a wonderful Saturday and wonderful weekend. And if you're anywhere near West Virginia, stay warm. And don't freeze out in the snow. If you're over in California, please stay safe. Thinking about you with the fires. And New York probably is getting a lot of snow too. But yeah,
we're okay. Thoughts and prayers to the folks who've been negatively impacted by the snow, the ice, the fires. We got to support each other. We really do. And please don't forget your neighbors who can't take care of themselves. Please don't forget the animals that can't take care of themselves. And just a small piece of advice, there's going to be a lot of animals, especially in the fire areas, that are running for their lives. Just leave them alone. Keep your pets inside and just let them be, folks. Let them be.
Alrighty. See you next time on Under the Hat podcast.
Thank you.